Hi, and thanks for joining today. I am Norman Merritt out of Atlanta, Georgia. I also have Bill Moran, who is from Augusta, Georgia. The purpose of this session is today to go over the basics of running a successful Webex event. What I'll do, I've run 70 plus Webex events myself. Prior to that, I did a large number of Zoom events. So these will just be going over the basic steps that I use when I'm doing an event. Basic settings and so forth that should work for most events. So then we'll have this brief introduction. Following that, we'll discuss scheduling a Webex event and then setting up and running the event, and then a couple of odds and ends, which basically are polls and getting the downloaded replay. So to get to Webex, you either do you've got the URL, which the long URL, you've got to just go to ibm.webex.com, which will redirect you to that longer URL. And from there, you're able to access the control panel for Webex and schedule your sessions and also launch your sessions on the day of the event. Okay, so as I mentioned, you can use the short URL, ibm.webex.com. And when you enter that URL, it'll bring you to this home page you see here. Now, as I refresh the screen, you'll notice a toolbar at the top of the page that just stays momentarily before you can actually make a decision what you need to do. It will then disappear. To access it, you have the arrow right here. Just click that, and that'll bring your menu back for you, and it should stay. As I mentioned, you have Webex meetings. That would generally be what you do for your standard team meetings and so forth. And so we're not going to cover that here. As I said, that's sort of an equal footing. Everybody comes in, everyone can access video, everyone can mute and unmute. So it's really for more of a roundtable type discussion. You still have some of the functionality you would have with an event. So if you really want a lot of interaction, you could go ahead and do a meeting. But what we're going to focus on here will be Webex Events. So if you click Webex Events, that will take you to the events page. You may or may not need to log in depending on if you have already signed on with your username and ID. And so the purpose here is to show how to schedule an event. So what we want to do first is go to host an event, which is generally going to be collapsed. So you can just click that to open that. And then you want to schedule an event. Just so you know, after we schedule the event, we'll go back to site events, and that's where you'll be able to locate it as well at a future date. So first thing we'll do is click schedule an event, and that brings us to the schedule event page. First, we'll discuss scheduling a Webex event. Now there are events, meetings, and then training. Webex, starting with Webex training, that is similar to Webex event, although the setup is a bit different. It also allows for breakout rooms, so a few additional features that you don't have with events. And Webex meetings are where everyone comes in, sort of like just going into a conference room. You all come in on an even footing. Everyone can mute and unmute, start and stop video. Has a little more control. Individual control over how the session runs. Now for a Webex event, that's comparable to, say, a facilitator in front of a class. So you have hosts and panelists who have the option to kind of control their video and audio. And then you have all the attendees who come in automatically muted, and basically they're just there to watch what's being presented, interact through chat or Q&A, and have the option, there's a raise hand option that allows them to, so you can identify them, unmute them, let them ask questions, and so forth. So now we'll go through the setup for scheduling a Webex event. Okay, so the first step we have to go through is scheduling a Webex event. The assumption I'm going to make here is that for the attendees, you are managing them either through Lotus Notes invitation or inviting them through Event Central. So this is just going to go on scheduling the Webex event and the basic steps you need to do to cover that. First thing you do want to do is gather all of your information that you need for the event. So you've got the event name, you've got the date and the time, a description, and all of your panelists. Have them identified. I'm going to set up one that I have coming up next week so that you can see the process that I go through to set that up. All right, first thing you want to do is get to the Webex website. So your URL, ibm.webex.com. See redirects to the long URL as well. So you come to this website and you'll see the row of options at the top that quickly disappears. All right, to get back to those tabs, use this up arrow. All right. And now, since we are scheduling an event instead of a meeting, you want to go to Webex Events. And then you have host event. If you come in for the first time, that's probably going to be collapsed. So just click the twisty, and then you want to go to schedule an event. Also, if you haven't logged in for your single sign-on, you'll probably have to you'll have an extra screen of your username and password for IBM. All right. And I'm just going to go through the fields that I generally know about, that I use on a regular basis. If there are the other fields, we can do them in a follow-up session, or you can go through the Webex help documents and try to work your way through there to find out that information. So event type is just standard. It's an online event. That's the only option they have, so I don't do anything with that. Event name, okay, that is the name that you're going to have for the event itself, which I have right here. Looks like they may have made a change here. If there is a check mark under delete for my meetings when completed and under required, I remove those check marks. The best I can figure out is if you put the check mark there, once the meeting's over, it's removed from the list, but occasionally I need to go back to my list of cited previous events to get any of the replay or attendance information and such. And then we don't require registration. Basically, it's all going to be handled through your Lotus Notes, once again, or Event Central, so that you don't need them to come to the site with the extra step of signing in with name, email, company name, and whatever other information it would generally ask. Also, we generally don't use an event password. If you wanted one, you could just type whatever you want that password to be. As it says, it must be at least 8 characters. Once again, that's just an added step for the attendees. If you give them a password, you have to do. Select a program. I don't mess with that at all. I'm not even familiar really with what the different programs are, and I haven't seen an advantage to using it. So then you go into date and time. So this one is for November 1st at 9:30 a.m. So go ahead, add just the drop down for the date, November. It'll basically show the current date and time here. So you have to do that as needed. Yeah, as you can see, it's currently 2:46, so it came up with a default of 2:40, or the setting of 2:45. So I think it probably does a incremental setting by like 15 minutes. So the start time is, as it says, 9:30. And though I don't have it here, it is a 1-hour meeting, so that's I go ahead and have that in for the duration. My time zone, I live in the Eastern time zone, and that's how all of my meetings are generally scheduled, so I just put in that one time zone. I don't worry about adding any other time zones on there. Now, for attendees can join 0 minutes before the scheduled start time. I don't put a check mark there. I believe what this is you can prevent them from coming in, actually joining the session for a certain period of time with the check, if you add that check mark there. But as an event, I'm always in a practice session when we get started. So the attendees, when they join in, they just basically see a blank screen until we are ready to start the broadcast. So I just let them join whenever they want to. Email reminder, I do not send out any emails through WebEx for the attendees, so I just keep that as none. Right. Next, we have audio conference settings. I just use the defaults here. What you'll see here, estimated number of callers, 500. Now, if you're having a large event, what that is, you can have up to 1,000 attendees. 500 of those could be on phone, which means then 500 would be on computer, audio. But that doesn't mean that you're not limiting it to 500 attendees at this point. It's just a limitation of WebEx is there can only be 500 on the phone. Mute upon entry for all participants. Of course, you want that, so you just don't have, if it's a large meeting, you don't have hundreds of people with beeps every time someone joins. Entry, exit, tone. So once again, no tone. So I leave that as it is. Next, I go to the event description and options. So the description given to me by my client, I'll just copy and paste that into the description field. And what this does is when the attendee initially comes to the site in WebEx, where he or she enters name and email, there will be the title and description that will be displayed on that screen momentarily. Most people don't actually pay attention to that. They just log in, and once they log in, they come to the blank WebEx meeting screen. I've never uploaded a picture at all, so I don't do anything with that. Who can view the attendee list? Well, I just keep it with host, presenter, and panelists. There generally is not a need to have all of the attendees able to see who all of the other attendees are. There's an option when you go to actually start the meeting where you can at least allow the attendees to see the number of attendees in the session. That way they get an idea that they're not the only person attending the session. Video, I just turn on video. I leave that as it is. High quality, I leave that as it is. Post-event survey, I don't do anything with this because most of our surveys are just going to be the NPS standard survey from Event Central, or you'll just have one that you would send through Lotus Notes. Most of us use probably Survey Gizmo or some tool such as that. Destination URL after event, honestly, I have no idea what that one is, so I leave that one blank. Attendees and registration. Once again, you're going to have the attendees. You're going to handle those invitations either probably through Lotus Notes or Event Central. So I don't worry about creating that invitation list here. But presenters and panelists, all right. This one you do have to create your invitation list for the panelists because the panelists and the attendees have different URLs that they use to join the meeting. And if you don't create the panelists here, then the panelists can always just use an attendee link, and you'll have the option to promote the person to a panelist once he or she is in the session. But so just to create your invitation list, just click that, and that will open that up. Let me expand it so you see everything that's on there a little better. And you just have to build this list out. So this one uses email address, not notes ID. So you'll have to get those. You can get those from Blue Pages if you don't have them otherwise. And then you just basically start to fill this out. Now, if there are certain contacts that you use on a regular basis, you may have already added them to the address book. I'll show you that too as we go, but a couple of these attendees or panelists that I have, Bill Moran, Kelly Atenito, I work with them on a regular basis, so I actually have them into my contact list. So for those, to add them as panelists, I can just go into my contacts, and you have view personal contacts or company address book. I have no idea how a company address book works. When I do it, it comes up blank. Personal contacts is my default. And then the default is also everyone in your list. So then if you had a long list, of course, just select your letter for the last name in the alphabet. I'm saying that. I don't know if it's last name or first name. Okay, it's by first name. All right, so just by the name in the list. So as I mentioned, I've got Bill Moran and Kelly Atenito, whom I work with on a regular basis. There's Bill, there's Kelly. Kelly, I'm going to go ahead and add as a panelist first. So I'm going to add panelist. And now you'll see that'll go back to this page. Panelist is Kelly Atenito is now listed as a panelist. Bill, I'm going to add as a panelist, but I wanted to also add him as an alternate host. So I'll go back in here. Alternate host, what that is someone within IBM, usually going to be on your team. You can add that person as an alternate host. What that does is, all right, you're setting up this event, you are the host. If for some reason you're not going to make the event or you're going to be late to joining, you want to go ahead and add an alternate host so that person can get the session up and running. So that you know when you have an alternate host assigned, if that alternate host, as I said, can open the session, but when you join, host controls will automatically revert back to you. So if there are any hosting issues during the session, I'll show that, how to set up and assign those during the when I show you how to run a session. So once again, Bill Moran, I check his name, and then I want to add as alternate host. That brings me back to this page. I've got Kelly and Bill is identified as an alternate host. You can add more than one alternate host if you need. Generally, there shouldn't be a reason unless you're just not sure who's going to be able to be on the event. And you want to, it depends on how far ahead you're trying to prepare this meeting. I have two other panelists I need to add. So for those, I need to put them under as new panelists. So type in the name, and then you want to type in the email address. Now, if this is someone that I'm going to use on a regular basis, and I want to add to the address book, what I would do is add new panelist in my address book. And I'm not going to do that in this case because this person is just going to be basically for one session. I can also invite this person as an alternate host, provided this person is, I believe, an IBM employee. So after I don't worry about the phone number and time zone, and then I add to invitation list, and you'll see Allison is now in the list of panelists. And then my last panelist I have is Peter Bradford. So once again, I just add the name, add the email address, and then add to invitation list. Now, before getting out of this, what I had to do is actually, I've added these as panelists to invite, but apparently that means I'm able to invite them, but they're not officially panelists for the event until I select them. So I just, in this case, select all and invite. And then that basically takes me out of that. That does not actually send out an invitation. That just apparently just makes it possible for them to get an invitation. So that one, then we go to email messages. I also don't worry about that because any of my emails generally are going to be done through Lotus Notes. So this is, I've set everyone up. Next, since everything is set up now for the event, I just go to schedule this event. And then it's going to say, do I want to send event emails? Previously, it seemed to be that if I did not send the email to the panelist, it didn't recognize them as a panelist, so the URL did not work for them. However, I tested that today, and now it just seems like I do the invite and select and so forth. I do not have to send out that email, which is a Webex email, which tends to confuse because the person will get that one, probably an Event Central invitation, a Lotus Notes invitation, and the Lotus Notes invitation, which generally includes pre-call, is going to have a slightly different time, so then the individuals get a little confused. And also, for some reason, these emails that Webex sends out tend to be a different URL than what I'm getting ready to show you when I go send later, since I don't have to send now. And then this gives me my event information. And these are the URLs I will use. But as I said, the Webex email that goes out apparently sends a different URL, although that one works and this one works. So now with this, the event is set up and ready to go. Now I'll end up using this for my invitations or in Event Central.
The attendees will want to use, you'll want to give them the attendee link. The panelists, when I send my pre-call invitation to the panelist, I generally will send, this is the panelist link, please use this. If this link does not work for whatever reason, I also include the attendee link. And then I as well include audio conference. Basically, I say this is as a backup in case your computer audio is not sufficient. With this, and then I also include this as the call-in information in Event Central or the email to the attendees as well. With this one, you can say you can get a call back as well, where you dial the number and have it call you back, and then it joins you in the event that way. And apparently that means you don't have to associate it to a given ID, which I could show you that when we actually go through running an event. You get a list of global call-in numbers, since the US is the default here, and that will show you the other numbers. I don't know which countries don't have toll-free numbers at this time, but they could just click that link to do it. Otherwise, you may have to just, if it doesn't carry over when you copy and paste, then you might want to just copy the URL. And that way you can paste that in there as well. Show toll-free dial-in restrictions, you can keep that in. Usually I'll end up just deleting that in my invitation. And then the access code they will need when they go to sign into the event. Possibly. So that's ready to go. If I needed to, I could go back in and edit the event using the Edit Event button, make any changes I need. I could add more panelists if we've changed the date and the time and so forth, make any changes, because then I could come in and edit invitation list, which would now allow me to make whatever changes I need here. Or I could just, if I want to make sure that I add every panelist that I needed, I can view invitation list and that will show. Unfortunately, you don't get to do this without going into the edit event mode. You don't get to see who the panelists are. So once again, if I made changes, I would update the event, but otherwise I just go back and that takes me to the event details again. Now to show where it signs up, any events that I have previously scheduled show up under Site Events. So that is the one that I just created for November 1st. Right here. Now, at any time I want to, I could start the event. Just if you needed to go in and practice something and so forth. Occasionally, you'll have the clients who want to run the event and do a practice session a few days ahead of time, and you can do that this way. If you do this usually on the day of the event, once you start it, when you end it, it will disappear off of this, off of the upcoming events. It may come back after a while, but sometimes it will just go listed as a past event. So with that, you want to be able to, you just click Show Past Events, and then that's going to give you a list of all of your past events. It will not show, like I say, once again, you do a session and then you stop the session. It will not show immediately in either of those locations. So it takes a time, I guess, to work through its network. So you can come back a little bit and find it again. But show past events, I could go back into any of my past events and then start a past event as well. And so basically that's it. With this link under Site Events, you can click the link, the title, and it takes you back to the event details. So with that, you have set up the event. It's ready to go. And the next step will be on actually starting the I should say scheduling. This is scheduling the event. The next section will be starting and setting up the event.
And now that you've got the event scheduled, what you'll have to do next on the day of the event is set it up and run it. Webex has its own defaults, which generally are not sufficient for what I do in my meetings. So usually 30 minutes before start time, I log in and I start to set up the all of the rights for the attendees, for the panelists, and any of the features that I need to enable or disable. And then from there, about 15 minutes prior to start time, then I have the panelists join so I can test computer audio and video and answer any questions, make sure no last minute changes to their presentations and so forth. Okay, so you have scheduled your event and you have sent out the invitations. Now the time has come to run your event. So initially you have to do certain setup for every event. Unfortunately, the defaults in WebEx are WebEx's defaults, not personalized to you. So in my case, there's a lot of personalization that I do that works better for me, and I just have to do that every meeting that I go into. So what we do is go to the WebEx site. And then WebEx, once again, as you can see, that header disappears rather quickly. WebEx Events. Host an event, click that twisty if it's not already, and then if this is the first time you've logged in with your internet ID and password, you'll have to do it here. From here, you will go where earlier you did schedule an event. This time you go to Site Events. Now, if you do not see your event here for whatever reason, which you should, if it has not happened yet, as you can see, I'm doing WebEx training, and that's today's date. I've scheduled it for 11 a.m., but I do have the option to start at any time. But say I'd gone in and practiced earlier this morning, it would suddenly show up as a past event. So if for some reason you do not see it in this list, you can click Show Past Events, and that's going to show everything you've had scheduled. You would be able to locate it there if need be. But as I said, in my case, I already have it here. So you can either start from here, but I'll usually go into WebEx training or the topic, as it says here, so that I can see these details. I'll make a note of the host key and also the event number in case for any reason my laptop locks up. I can go to another computer and hopefully get control of the meeting before everything crashes. Thing with WebEx, as I probably said before, is it is a single point of failure. So if the host loses connectivity for any reason, everybody drops. And with that host key, as I said, I can run to my other computer. If say just this locks up, it doesn't lose connection, I can on that computer enter that host key, and then I'm able to take control of the meeting from that computer. As the host, when you go to start a meeting, you do not do it using the panelist or attendee links. They do not recognize you as the host that way. So what you need to do is just from that start location on the previous screen or from the Start Now option here. So I will go ahead, and since this is all set up, Start Now. And I'll usually do this, I'll join my meeting about 30 minutes before start time. That gives me time to do my initial setup and so forth. And then for the pre-call for the panelists, I have them join roughly 15 minutes before. Kind of need at least 15 minutes to test their audio, their video. Remember, since we are a social company, we do like to use video whenever possible. You will just have some panelists who don't want to use their video regardless, so you just live with that, but you definitely have to make sure you have suitable audio. All right, this one, at this point, you would connect your audio and video. In my case, I'm recording this in Zoom with the video enabled, so I will not do that here. Excuse me. But that would be connect audio and video. And then you would have the option of whether you connect using your computer audio. You can get a phone number to call in. And then that'll give you an ID to associate with your number and name so that it identifies you as a host on the phone. You also have an option where you can put in a phone number and it would call you back. But so for this, like I said, I'm just not going to be able to connect to audio and video here at this time. So right now, I'm in a live session. So anyone who joins, which going to join on my phone, so I have an attendee. Anyone who joins would be able to see everything going on at this point. So about as immediately as I come in, I go to event and start practice session. You'll see the header changes color, and that means I am in the practice session. Now, if you have any panelists, anyone at the time when you pull it over, it'll automatically mute them, and they would have to unmute to speak at that point. Also, when you're in the live session, don't share your files that you're going to use for the meeting and then go into the practice session. When you do that, you do not have access to those files until you start the broadcast. So you're not able to practice with them in this private session. A couple of things that you do to set up. Once again, you have event. I go to event and then options. Now, a couple of these things will be different for a Mac user, and I'll put those in. Bill Moran did a quick recording on those differences, and we'll add that to this recording. So it's event and then options. All right, so this is one that is different for Mac. Now, everything comes up checked. You kind of want to go ahead and personalize this the way you want. Number one, I don't worry about attention tracking. I'm not really keeping an eye on who is going to, we multitask. So if someone goes to check their same time or their email, you'll end up getting a red exclamation point by their name. And I don't really want to concern myself with that. Raise hand, I keep that enabled because most of my sessions I'll do a live Q&A, and in order to do that, I have the attendees raise hand, then I'm able to unmute the attendee, allow the attendee to ask question, and then I can mute the attendee again. Video, I just go ahead and keep that enabled. Feedback, I don't use on my meetings, so I just take that check mark off. And then, excuse me, here's a big decision you get to make. You've got chat and you've got Q&A. All right, with Q&A, they're able to, when they ask a question, when the attendee asks a question, types in a question, it gets posted to all of the panelists. In order to answer that question, one of the panelists has to actually click that question, type in a response, and submit. So you think that's a good way to control it. But then, depending on the type of question, it could be asked multiple times, and before somebody can respond, since the attendees don't see that question until a response is posted, you may get several versions of that same question. Also, with Q&A, a panelist is not able to simply enter a comment and send to the attendees, such as, we have this deck available for download on Box, here's the link. You can't do that. All you can do is click a question, and you can't submit a question as a panelist. So that kind of ties your hands there a bit. The other option is chat. Now, with chat, you have the option to, once again, since we are a social company and we like the interactivity, you'll have to pick who they can send chats to. And we usually want them to be able to send it to all the attendees as well, so that everyone kind of gets involved in the conversation. Now, so with chat, and when I go through to show you how that gets personalized and customized, there is an option to all attendees. And that is the first option on the list when somebody does a chat. Now, unfortunately, if someone keeps that as the default, when they send that chat, when an attendee sends that chat to all attendees, the panelists never see it. So that poses a problem. You do have to explain to the people to please use not all panelists, but all participants. And then you'll see that that's the last option in the list. And so they have to scroll to get to that, and nobody generally ever sees that. And if you have to post that throughout the session as other people join, because then they send their chats to all attendees. If you do both, which you can do both if you want, chat and Q&A, but it helps to have an additional moderator or two to handle everything, because as the host, you're doing a lot of the background technical work. in my case, I tend to be the one who pushes the slides for the panelists, just to minimize swapping controls and so forth. So for my meetings, I just go with chat. So I will just disable, and you'll see when I click disable the Q&A and apply, where you see it at the top here, it's going to disappear. So Q&A, apply. I can either do apply or OK. And so once it's done, then I click OK. I don't worry about content sharing or import mode. I just keep those defaults as they are.
If you're hosting your event on a Mac, you will see some differences in setup than you will from a Windows system. So on your Mac, once you start your event, go under Webex Events, select Preferences. This will pop up a Preferences box. Make sure you go under the Tools section, and here you will want to unselect Q&A, feedback, and attention tracking. Make sure you select OK.
Now for the screen, I'll come down here, controls. This is your audio, your video. This is for sharing. Here's your record button. Now this is your panelist tab. Panelist panel. I'm sorry, my apologies. Your participant panel that will show up on the right when you click that, and then you'll see it's, when it changes to the blue color, it's active. And there's your participant panel. What you'll see here, there are two participants, the panelist, which is me, and then attendee. There's one attendee, that is me on my mobile phone. And then you have an option to view all attendees. So I will go ahead and click that just so you see that. And as you can see, in demerit, that would be on my phone. I'm an attendee here. And I also go ahead and pull up my chat. And then here's my chat. Now, once I get into the actual the event, I'll kind of just show how this chat selection works. I need to set up privileges for my participants. And so we go participant, assign privileges to, start with the panelists. For panelists, you see everything is not selected. I go ahead and select all, just easier, allows them to share as needed. It also gives them the option to record the event. A note about that is the host is the only one that gets a good recording. The host, when the host records, that goes to the Webex server, and it gives you a smooth video and then the replay and so forth. Anyone else who tries to record will get the option to save to the hard drive, what location you want to save it to. And that just ends up with a very low quality recording. Good if you needed to have an emergency backup, but so it's just checked there. I don't worry about taking it off from the panelists. Then, okay. Now I have to assign privileges to the attendees. So as go to participant, assign privileges to attendees. For this, I just give them number of attendees under view. That just shows that they can see that, oh, well, there are 100 other attendees, other than just, so it doesn't look like it's just me and the panelists. It just gives them more of a sense of community. They see there are a number of people on there. And then the other one for communications, this is where you're setting up your chat. So right now, the default is the attendees would be able to send a chat to the host, the presenter, or to the panelists. And then I go all attendees, because if you just leave those checked, those are the only ones who actually get the option to see the chats. So all attendees allows everyone to eventually be seen by everyone, but that all attendees is also the one that causes the problem where they come in, they post a question to all attendees, and the panelist never sees it. So after those two checks, I just click OK, and that's set up for them.
To complete the setup for your privileges for your participants, you will want to go under Participants, assign privileges to, well, take a look under Panelist. Under Panelist, these items should all be checked, so you should be good to go and not have to make any changes. If you look under Participants, and assign privileges to attendees. Under here, under Controls, you want to select View the number of attendees. And under Communications, you want to select all attendees so that everyone in the event will be able to see everyone's comments in the chat area. And be sure to click Assign.
Now, in the event that you're going to do polling, you need to set that, have that set up to show. So you go to View, Panels, Manage Panels. Polling is not enabled by default on the event. So the available panel is polling, and then just add and click OK. Once again, there are other options, but these are the options that I will use on a regular basis for what tend to be good events. So as you can see, my polling window shows, and I can always minimize it. Now you have the option to create the poll now. You open that session, you have 30 minutes to get everything up and running and work with your panelists. I tend to go in earlier, previously start a meeting. You can run just any kind of Webex event, set one up, just a dummy event, go in, create a poll, save it to your hard drive, and then that way you have quicker access to it at this point. Otherwise, you have to create the poll here, create your answers, get it ready to go, do another poll if there's more than one. Just a little too time consuming. If there's any way to help it, do it ahead of time. So with that ready to go, now I can minimize that and go back to participants for a moment. Sorry, my video is in the way, so let me move that. And you'll see here by my name, there I am the polling coordinator, and I can assign that to someone else. Since I don't have anyone else logged in right now, I don't have that option. And then you'll see this sphere right here by my name that shows that I am the presenter. I have presentation rights, which you can assign to any panelist. Once again, I don't have the ability to assign that. Actually, I do want to get the audio connected with my phone. So anyway, at this point, I've got all the defaults set up, ready to go. And then I would go ahead if I wanted to share any content. When sharing content, I generally try to share a file. Rather than with a PowerPoint, you could either share the application, share the PowerPoint application, and that takes over your screen. So you lose some of the controls for WebEx. They'll sort of disappear and go to the pull down bar at the top of the screen. Also, it's not as fluid as if you share a file. What it does is it will take that PowerPoint, or you can share a video. So I can share the file, and then that converts each slide into an image and basically puts it on the WebEx server for easier control. I can give it to another presenter. I make another panelist a presenter, and then that panelist can control the slides that way, or I maintain the control over the slides myself. Now with that, if the panelist has transitions and slide builds, unfortunately those do not get included this way. So if it's someone who wants to do that in terms of slide builds and so forth, you'll want them to actually share application, so other application, and then they would be able to pick that and then control that way. And then that tends to get a little confusing at times for the other panelists, because they lose these controls at the bottom. And once again, they go to a pull down at the top, and you just have to try and explain to them. If you're a Windows person and they have a Mac, there may be some differences, or vice versa. So I make every effort to just use a simple slide presentation whenever possible. Now, if they are doing demos and so forth, then in those cases, yes, they will have to usually share screen and do it that way. Excuse me. So if I wanted to share a file, let's see if I have I have them everywhere, and I'll probably pick a folder that does not have something. So I'm just going to pick a one at random. I close my view all attendees. So you see this, it'll show file sharing. Just give that to continue. It takes about 10 seconds or so to load a PowerPoint. Videos actually load faster. And so just as an example, when you do want to do a video, you do want to share file, then upload that video. Otherwise, it tries to play from your, if you just like try to launch an MP4 from your laptop, it's sort of trying to play it from your computer speakers to the microphone, to the attendees, and just is a lower quality. Okay, so as pretty much at this point, I'm ready to go. You'll see your controls for the PowerPoint. This is the slide you are on. You have an arrow below it and an arrow above it. The arrow above is a back arrow, previous page, and the arrow below it is the next page. So you can just click through the slides. Careful not to, if you click the zoom by mistake, you'll see, all right, it zooms the view. It'll also zoom it on the attendees as well. All right. So then you also have an option if you need to, if it helps you, you can do this thumbnail view. That's going to show you the slides. The attendees do not see this. They will still only see what you're sharing. So then you can also click to the different slides here. So I'll use that every now and then. Usually I just stick with the arrows and don't worry about using the thumbnail view. You have the annotation option. That would be for me right now. I don't think that's enabled for the attendees at this point. So a note on that. If you're going to have whiteboard activities that you do want the attendees to do, you will need to enable annotation for them. Let me go ahead and share a whiteboard so you see how that works. Go down to share, new whiteboard. And then here are my controls that I see. You've got the arrow that'll just show, and click that, and then that shows your name and the arrow. You got the text tool, line. You can draw shapes or square. All right. Usually, too, the default color is yellow, which no one can really see, so you can go in and change that. And this is erase for me, so I can clear what I've done, maybe. All right, and then they also have an option to save the whiteboard. So now you'll see I have a whiteboard being shared, I have a PowerPoint deck being shared, so I can switch between them, and then that's what we'll, and then I can work back and forth between them. So I can go back, and once again, I can go right back to the whiteboard. I can share multiple whiteboards. I can share multiple presentations. Okay. So now that about this point you have everything set up, and this is the point where your panelists start to join, and you'll want to then you just confirm their audio and video, explain anything about where the controls are if they're not aware, and you're basically ready to go. So once everyone is ready, you've got to start the broadcast. I will just, for me, as a host, I'm usually not the one doing any of the speaking, so I'll just before I start broadcast, I will disable my video, and then I will go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, end practice session. Okay, do a countdown for them so they're aware. Then as I say that the session has ended, you'll see that the color has changed back to this gray color. So you are now live. If I wanted to record, click the record button. I'll go ahead and record it. Record. It takes a moment to connect to the server. I'll usually do this before I start the meeting, before I start the broadcast. I have editing. If you don't have editing software, just be sure to start the recording, have it make the notification. It will make a notification saying this meeting is being recorded. And then have your panelists start speaking at that point. And then I just close this because I don't want that running on my screen the entire time. Also, another point in terms of sharing the file instead of sharing PowerPoint is if you get a same time or mail or anything that comes up on your screen, Slack, you'll end up with a gray box temporarily in front of what you're trying to present. So that's another reason to share file. And so at this point, I'm running the meeting. Now let's see what happens in terms of if I can get the annotation ready for the panelists. And I did not mean that. I meant the attendees. Assign privileges to attendees. Okay, now that I've started the broadcast session, I have an option to annotate. I think that, honestly, I think that only works with the whiteboards. So if you have annotate on at this point, you click OK. Now they will have the ability to annotate when you launch the whiteboard. I have noticed in the past, for some reason, occasionally I would see one of the attendees with the arrow and the name just moving around on the screen, and suddenly, okay, well, you know, how did they get that right? What happened? So generally, I'll do my annotation privileges just prior to the whiteboard. You know, as the host, it's just one of the things to be responsible for. Now, what I didn't do, which I probably should have done, well, prior to starting the session, if I had any polls, I should have opened those so I'd have them available. So let me go ahead and I'll do that now. Anything that I'm doing over here, well, the event is going on, nobody's going to see. So until I launch a poll, so I can do this if need to be. But also, once again, all right, I'm listening for my presenter to say next slide, next slide, next slide, so that I'm just back and forth. So I would open a poll that I created earlier. And I'll do this for one that I did for an event the other day. I actually did 2 polls. You'll see I saved them, and then it comes up to poll, just the name, whatever name I used. I had a poll that was going to be on slide 3 of that presentation, and then a poll that was going to be on slide 15. So I can open the poll, and it'll be here ready to go. Poll slide, that's poll 1, slide 3. I can open, if I'm going to do multiple polls, I can go ahead and open multiple polls. Okay, so my other poll was for slide 15. So now both polls are ready to go. Let's now go back to the first poll. Now I can do options. By default, they are set for 5 minutes. This one I did yesterday, I did for 2 minutes, so I made that change. But you can change it if you just want it to be a very quick poll. You can just change the time. And for the poll results, I want them to include no answer, and then I can show the number of responses, and then click OK. Now at this point, whenever you're ready, I can open the poll. If I open the poll, you'll see that I only have 1 attendee, so let me move my video again. And okay, I'm going to go to my phone and allow me to take the poll. So you'll see there's only 1 attendee. The panelists aren't set up to take the polls. So I will just click an answer. And you'll see here in progress, it shows that I had the poll open for me. 1 of 1, I've responded. So the time will run out on its own, or you can go ahead and close the poll. Actually, I want to see if at 20 seconds, it may pop up a message. I want to see if it does that. And it is not. Occasionally, you'll see a message where it's just showing the countdown, but you can close it at any time. So now I'm going to close the poll. There's the message I was talking about. So I go cancel on that. So the poll is now closed. Now, if you want to share the results with the attendees, at this point, click Poll Results, and then Apply. And that will show those results to the attendee, which on my phone, you can see there's the poll results, 1 of 1 answer. Then I'm ready to go to the next poll whenever I need to. Now, the poll panel basically stays open for the attendee. That can just close that, minimize it. The attendees can, to get back to the chat and so forth. And then poll slide, I'm ready for the next one. I can go to the second poll whenever I need to, and it's ready to go. Now we'll go to chat. Let's see, I won't try to do a chat, but as you can see, we have all participants, host, presenter, host and panelist, all attendees, all panelists, all participants. As you can see, it's the last option in the list. And for the attendees, their default is all attendees. So they get that pop-up list. So that's why you want to tell them, I start off my session with a chat that just says, when using chat, please select to all participants, because panelists are not able to see chat sent to all attendees. And then I will copy and paste that repeatedly through the session as more people join. I have noticed for me, and I'm very cautious about this, and this is the reason I have to have that host key. I tend to keep this at all panelists. When I get that pop-up and I start scrolling back and forth, because every time an attendee submits a chat, that attendee's name is added to this list so that I could scroll through and respond to an individual. Or if something is sent to me privately, I can scroll through and respond. But for me, I have noticed that will lock this screen up in a heartbeat as I start to scroll. It does not kick me out of the session, or it does not end the session, but I cannot use this computer at that point. I have to get on my other computer, put in that host key, and take over from there. So that's another reason to share a file versus sharing my screen, because if I'm sharing my screen and it locks up, then I'm not able to get control of it to do that. So sharing the file. That's worst case situation, just to make you aware. So I do tend to just try to leave that at all participants. Another thing I do when I'm doing an event is I do try to have 2 computers when at all possible, so that I can actually go in and do my chats on that other computer. I don't know if it's just a resource draw. This is not an old computer, but if it's something specific for the host or whatnot, but with the other computer, then I can do my individual chats I can't necessarily do to individual attendees, but I can sit there and do things to all attendees. I can look at what gets posted if I'm logged in on the other computer as an attendee. If someone does a chat and submits it to all attendees, then I can copy and paste it and resubmit to all participants. So in large part, that's running a meeting. I mean, I will say when you get to the Q&A session, so that when you get to the Q&A session, there is a raised hand feature for the attendees that will appear right here. And you explain to the attendee. Now, the attendee may not have the participant panel open, so they're not going to see that. So I generally will have to explain that they also don't see all of these controls. It's usually the third control in the WebEx bubble icons. I say, if you want to ask your question, use your raise hand feature. It's at the bottom of the bottom right of the participant panel. If your participant panel is not open, that is the third icon on the WebEx controls. Click that, and then that person can raise the hand. Now, when that person raises the hand, the name will appear under the attendee, at which point you're able to unmute. They will also appear in the attendee list, but this is in alphabetical order. They don't get pushed to the top here, so then you'd have to scroll down through the list and see if anyone has a raised hand and allow you to do that. Another thing, once the question is answered, you do not have the option to lower hands for everyone. So you would either instruct them to please lower the hand, or you just try to keep up with which hands have been raised, and so you don't go back and ask the person again. Another thing, as you can see, my attendee, Indy Merritt, that's me on my phone. I click that, and I have the option to make that person a panelist. Now, I'm not connected on audio on my phone, I don't think, so that's why I'm muted, but I could make panelist. Now, you will see times I've seen where you'll have a name here. You click that, and you just do not get that option to make a panelist. That's say one of your panelists had problems with the link, so came in as an attendee and you wanted to promote, you could do it that way. If you highlight a name and you don't get that make panelist option, usually it's something to do with their audio connection. So like they don't have an audio associated with that video, and it's just not able to get them on. So I would have them basically disconnect it and try again. But I do have the option. I can now make the other me a panelist. But you'll see in the panelist list, there's myself as the host and the other me as a panelist. Now, here's where I can come in, and then I can give presentation rights. I'll just click the name. Do I want to change to presenter? Yes. And now it'll show it's passing presenter rights. Now that person has the right to present. Until that person has presenter rights, all that person will see is a few options. Like, let's see if I go to share here. All right, see, I no longer have presenter rights, so all I have is an option to share file and a new whiteboard. You'll see, and now this individual can then make someone else a presenter, or reassign, or as the host, I can come back and take presenter rights back or assign to someone else. Now that I'm the presenter, when I go to share, you'll see I have the full list of options. Basically, you finish your session. Now you would be able to, if at the end of a session, I'll always go back into my private session, just so I can do whatever final wrap up. If there's any follow up you want to do with the presenters. Also, something I should have noted: when you start the presentation and when you leave the practice session, it automatically mutes all the other panelists. So they have to unmute themselves to speak, or you could unmute them individually. Also, if they are sharing anything, file or video or anything, it pretty much stops their share. So the host is the only one who keeps sharing control throughout the whole time, between practice session and live, and then live and practice. So then what I'll do is go ahead and stop my recording. In this case, stop. Once again, I can usually keep it running just because I have editing software to do, cut off the beginning, the end, anything in between that I need to. Then stop recording. Then I would go back into my practice session. At this point, the attendees no longer see, I'm no longer sharing anything with the attendees. They don't hear or see the video, and your banner, your header changes back to the cream color. And from this point, my final thing to do is to save all of my files that were used that I need to have for later. So if I go File, End Event, or click the X here, End Event. You got an option, Share Event Files. That is not a default, checked by default. Click that. If you do not click that, you lose your chat, you lose your whiteboard, you lose your poll questions or poll results and everything. Then by default, it's going to save to your Documents folder. By date. So it'll show the date, and then it'll show the name that you had assigned to the event. Not sure what those numbers are. but that'll just save to, like I said, your document folder. In my case, I do a lot of events, so I can also select a place where I want to save them. So Webex training session is a folder that I created previously. Click OK. And then you'll see that it saves to, it changes that location. Now, when I end event, it will kick everyone out and close the event for me. So that's how to run an event, basically. And at this point, eventually you will get an email. It used to be an hour or so. Lately, it has been up to 8 hours. I would get an email saying that your video is ready for download. And when I get that email, then I can download the video, then edit it as needed, upload it to Box or wherever you do want to store it. And it's good to go. All right. And now we'll cover the odds and ends. I said, as I mentioned, this is basically just creating a poll. And at the end of your session, it takes some time to get the message that your session is available for download. So it's just going over the email and obtaining the recording. Okay, just a couple of quick points just to go over. It would be creating polls if you're going to use those. And then also when the event is done, getting your recording. So for your poll, like I say, you can either do that when you first set up and when you go to start your event, do it in that pre-call time, but I'll generally do those ahead of time. Do my best to get the client to get me the questions needed, or if you're doing it yourself, that's fine as well. But just once you get the questions, what you can do is just open a random event that you have scheduled or create one to do it. Doesn't matter, it just allows you the opportunity to create the poll and then save it so that you have it for later. So already in Webex, I will go to Site Events, and I'll just pick one at random. So start that session. Now to set up a poll. Once again, since the poll panel does not show by default, you have to enable that. So View, Panels, Manage Panels. Click Polling. As a note, Multimedia Viewer, you have the option where you can give someone a link or to a video, and then it allows it to play in a small panel on the side. I've used that once, not very impressed with that, so I don't mess with that one at all. So just click Polling, add it to your panels, click OK. As you can see, it appears here. So just to create a poll, if I have the questions, fine. I'm just going to make this up as I go here. So I'm in poll 1. And the question, all right, you have multiple choice, single answer, multiple choice, multiple answer, or short answer. I have not done the short answer. Most of them are either going to be single answer or multiple answer. So I'll stick with single answer here. Then click New, and that allows you to enter your question. And then you come up to the top, enter your question. Oh, no, let's go. Did you just type in, find this training useful? If you do have it in a text file or Word document, you can do copy and paste to get that content in there. And then that's it. I don't have to, you just go off of it, and then you don't have to save it initially. And then you go add your answers, all right? You just click to add an answer. Very, all right. So now I'm going to, see, I click up and that's there. Now I want to add another answer. Somewhat. You can add another answer. Not very. Okay, I'll just keep it simple. And then not very. And then just click off of that. And I can add multiple questions if I needed to. Okay, so if I wanted to add a second question, all right, click new. And then would you recommend this to a coworker? All right, click add for my answer, yes. Add for the next answer, no. And you can either click add or just click off, all right. And I have a 2-question poll now. Okay. Or you can stick with 1 question. You can do multiple polls throughout the event. In this case, I will just go ahead and save this poll. And then you just pick your location where you want it to go. I'll go to my Webex training. Sample poll. Save. So that poll is now saved. If I go back to look at that. Somewhere, I do have it. Webex training session. Let's see, sample poll, extension ATP. So I can close the poll. No, it's not. And when I come back the day of the event, or later once I've started the event, I can come and open a poll. Open. I already got that folder selected by default here. So sample poll. Open. And it's ready to go. As mentioned at this point, if you're in the event, you open the poll and it will start the poll for anyone. It'll give, right now, I have no attendees, so there's no one to answer. Give it time. You'll see you have the countdown timer here. Once again, the default is set for 5 minutes. So it will just count down. Excuse me. So at any point, you can close the poll and then you can show poll results, and then that will show those results to the attendees. And that pretty much explains polls. Now, once your session is done, as I have mentioned previously, you've recorded the session, you've ended the session. Eventually, you will get an email showing that the session is available for download. So, already did one earlier this morning. The email messenger says your Webex recording is available for viewing. You'll see play recording. There are some other options as well: edit, download, manage recordings, and view FAQ. So I just go to play recording. That will take me in. I'll have an option for playback and download. So then I just download the recording. I can save, I'll save it. It'll save to my downloads. Yeah, it was a very short recording. Open the file. And there is my MP4 file ready to use as needed. All right, I'd like to thank you for joining today. If you do have any questions, there's my notes ID, Norman Merritt /Atlanta/IBM. I can answer most of the questions for you. If it is something specific with a Mac, I would contact Bill Moran, and he could assist with that. Hopefully this session has been helpful for you, and thank you for joining.